came into office in 2014 with a ready-formed plan for an industrial strategy, which my colleague Andrew Jones and I had put together. Andrew's a professor of economics and had a very clear view that the British don't do economics too well, and that the solution was to create localized ecosystems by building clusters of industries in the right sectors of the new emerging economy. And that's what we set about doing from pretty much the moment we were given the honour of leading this borough. We looked at all the anchor institutions we might want to link with. The BBC was certainly one of them. We looked at the NHS Trust, which was another. But we'd noticed that Imperial College London, as they were called at the time, had bought some land to build student accommodation in the north of the borough. And we went and saw Professor Alice Gast, who was the president of Imperial. And to be honest, we got lucky because prior to becoming the president of Imperial, Alice had been Hillary Clinton's science envoy and therefore had a global understanding of the situation with ecosystems. But more importantly, she'd been at MIT and in Stanford, where she'd seen the Kendall Square and Bay Area ecosystems grow, and pretty much said yes as soon as we pitched her that we wanted to take the very smartest ideas in science, tech, engineering, maths, medicines that they were producing and put an ecosystem of businesses around them. And that meant startup space and scale-up space, which would largely be coming as spin-outs from the university. So we signed that agreement and formally launched it in this room, or a room very similar to it on a different floor, in 2017. And it's gone very well since. Behind me over here is scale space. The idea is that when you have very small innovations taking place, so you have people, for example, who are using algae-based mesh to attack CO2 and produce oxygen. If you put it on a building, in fact you put it on a lot of, 1 hectare of buildings, it would do the work of 147 hectares of rainforest. They've developed paint that produces oxygen and swallows CO2. But they've developed cutting-edge life science that are tackling cancers and strokes. They're growing meat in factories, which will replace the meat industry. There's a lot of stuff going on here, and it's very, very innovative. So if you look, I suppose the numbers could probably speak for themselves. Since we launched our strategy in 2017, we've had £6 billion of high growth investment. To put that into context, that is more than all of West London put together, and we're a tiny borough compared to other councils of the West London Alliance. Our green tech, which is our second biggest area, we've had more green tech investment than Manchester, Birmingham and Bristol combined. So there's some magical science happening here, and that's very important. It's being monetised into jobs, which is why there's now 8,000 new jobs that are being created in those sectors since we launched our industrial strategy. Now I should stress our industrial strategy covers the whole borough. The innovation district is the White City Innovation District. We twinned 2 years ago with Barcelona's 22 Hats Innovation District, and we're in the process of twinning with other innovation districts in other liberal democracies. And what we're really keen to do is to share best practice on how we grow and what the lessons are. And I was at a convention last week looking at this, and one of the things that's really clear is I think we're in the vanguard of doing something quite special in Europe. And there's a model here that I think we can use to roll out and regenerate the whole of the UK economy if we get it right.
And Earls Court will form part of that knowledge district as well, will it?
The whole borough does, yeah. So when we first started talking to Delancey, I think the first time I met Jamie Ripblatt, he was like, "What are you doing here?" This was what we told him about. And that was some years ago, before the numbers began to look quite so alluring for a developer. And they've pretty much fitted what they're building in Earls Court to fit with that plan. It will be a green new neighbourhood, which will be amazing, but it will also have office space and facilities that will allow start-up entrepreneurs to grow. Same with Shepherd's Bush Market, same with Olympia. Olympia came to the launch, for people behind, Olympia came to the launch of our industrial strategy in 2017. Afterwards they told me it was one of the reasons they decided to buy Olympia, and once they bought it, they now have linked it directly into our industrial strategy. So we think the whole point of building a cluster, we see ourselves in terms of a triple helix of entrepreneurial municipal government, world-leading institutions, and science, tech, engineering, maths and medicine and media businesses. We see that as a triple helix for really good, effective growth that will give us long-term jobs. I think what happens when you begin to create a global centre is it gets a centre of gravity. So that's why, you know, we're very fortunate that Novartis, one of the key leaders in their field, have moved in, which has really strengthened our life science offer. But so have lots of other companies in different sectors. Airbus is here, Autolus is here, ITV moved in, NATO's moved in. So you can see now that there's a lot of people in boardrooms around the world saying, if we're going to settle in the UK and we specialise in these sectors, White City and the wider Hammersmith and Fulham area looks like one of the places that you have to put at the top of your list. And that, I think, is really the success of what we've been able to do. If you can combine that with scale businesses who need to go from small to large, or startup businesses, nearly all of whom are spin-outs from the university sector, all of a sudden you've got a sort of vitality to the economy and the community that I think begins to lift us back up again. You always need a complete, holistic vision of what the future should look like when you're in politics. And our view was fundamentally, to quote Bill Clinton's 1992 campaign, it's the economy, stupid. So how do we get that to work for everybody with an inclusive industrial strategy? And how do we make it a place where people just want to come and hang out and live, work and just be? So we're looking to, you know, we're very inspired by places like Ghent and Bruges and other countries where they've began to think about what is the modern world going to look like for citizens. And therefore, you know, we're looking at completely reshaping Wood Lane, completely reshaping some other roads and putting more parks in, and creating spaces for where it's easier for people to live and play and work. And that's very much what we're doing. Additionally to that, the risk with any area that makes a place wealthy, and some of the developers who are already here have got particularly wealthy, and just, I think, are the luckiest people around in some ways, because they went from buying land at one price and it just went up, nothing to do with them, it's to do with our industrial strategy and the change in land value. And the problem there is, you know, we've got some of the poorest people in northwestern Europe live in and around White City. Well, I can tell you, we built a £150 million Ed City Centre. It's the biggest capital investment we've done. It's just down the road near QPR Football Club and next to L'Oreal, who have taken offices here. And it's got a state-of-the-art youth zone. It opened the Sunday before last. The thing that struck me when we opened it was the looks on people's faces as they walked around and they just saw all the facilities for them and their children. These are people who, you know, they just seem to say, you know, we didn't expect anything good like this to happen for us, but it did, because government needs to be on people's side and it needs to be, you know, fighting to build a good society, and you can't do that without effective placemaking, effective economy, and thinking about what's a good life for people in a good society with the right type of opportunities. And I think we've managed to wrap that up. If you look at our civic campus, which is just down the road in Hammersmith, it's not called a town hall, it's called a civic campus. That captures the ethos of what we want to do with the future of a borough. So it will have not just offices for council officers, startup space for entrepreneurs, a new concert hall, a new Sky public restaurant which we'll rent out to a very good restaurant chain or restaurateur, and a new public square, a new 5-screen art house cinema, a new art gallery. So if you can create a civic space where people want to flood in to spend a weekend looking at art, or going to a concert, or going to work with a laptop in a sort of like convivial space, what you get is a degree of spontaneous interaction with people, and that's what we think is essential to our placemaking. Richard Rogers was a big influence on us, and me in particular, when we won control of what was Cameron's favourite council. He, as a Labour peer, was very excited by that, having had his office in Hammersmith for a very long time. So I think he was one of the first people to send me congratulations, one of the first people to ask to come and see me. And we straight away started talking about how we'd build a place. He was very much, how do you create a space where people can just live a good life? Because architecture is there for people to live good, full lives. And if you contrast that with my friend Andrew, the Professor of Economics, Andrew Jones, who was very much of, what does a good life look like in 2050 or turn of the next century? And actually we can't know the level of technological change. We know it's changing very quickly. But we know anthropologically that human beings are happiest when we're surrounded by green, clean areas, where there's water, where there's places to get together and do the things people like to do, like eat together, sing together, dance together. You know, can you create spaces that are the epitome of what a good society is? Well, you can if you've got brownfield sites, and you can if you've got some of the advantages that I've just run through.
And what about Hammersmith Bridge? Will you keep that for pedestrians and cyclists?
It's a good point about Hammersmith Bridge. To provide some context about the expenditure London boroughs have undertaken on all the bridges in London, it's worth noting that the government's figures say that for between 2010 and 2021, all London councils spent £100 million on bridges. And Hammersmith Bridge will cost £250 million to fix for a single bridge, and we've already spent about 30 million on it. So you need to see that, you know, Hammersmith Bridge was almost, despite Carnegie having come up with new types of steel that you could build bridges and skyscrapers out, we didn't use that in Hammersmith in 1887. We used cast iron and wrought iron and wood. And indeed the suspension structure itself, because it's a suspension bridge, was held in place by cast iron pedestals that when we used technology brought in from the Golden Gate Bridge from California to look through all of the metal and see what the structure of this cast iron was like, it was riddled with cracks, and therefore the bridge was at risk of pinging into the river, given that TfL was sending 5 buses an hour at a time across it. So it closed for safety reasons. It was a risk of catastrophic collapse, but to fix it is extremely complicated because it is an ancient, although it's built in the mid to late 19th century, it's really used early 19th century, early industrial revolution technology, and that's why it's so expensive. But Norman Foster has been extremely useful, coming up with some very innovative solutions, and we're grateful to have his and Sir John Ripblatt, who's supported him, to have both of them having helped us on that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.